Harold James Nicholson. A senior officer with assignments across Asia and the Middle East during the 1980s and 1990s, Nicholson operated at the heart of American intelligence. But beneath the surface, he harbored a dangerous secret, one that would make him the highest-ranking CIA officer ever convicted of espionage. Between 1994 and 1996, while stationed at CIA headquarters in Langley, Nicholson began funneling classified information to Russian intelligence. In return, he received over $300,000 in cash. He exposed the identities of fellow officers, revealed CIA training protocols, and sabotaged ongoing operations. His betrayal wasn't a fleeting lapse. It was calculated and sustained, all while training new recruits at the CIA's elite operations school. The depth of the damage was catastrophic. Suspicion mounted when polygraph tests raised red flags, and CIA counterintelligence teamed up with the FBI to surveil Nicholson. In 1996, agents caught him red-handed at Dulles International Airport with top-secret documents and evidence of recent meetings with Russian handlers. He was arrested and, in 1997, sentenced to 23 years in prison. But the story didn't end there. A decade into his sentence, the FBI uncovered a second conspiracy. Nicholson had recruited his son Nathaniel to act as a courier. Through prison visits, he passed coded messages and received cash from Russian agents, resuming his betrayal from behind bars. In 2009, Nicholson pleaded guilty again and received an additional 8-year sentence. Harold James Nicholson's story is one of deep betrayal, not just of a country, but of family and trust. Even from prison, his loyalty to a foreign adversary outweighed the oath he once swore. Andrew Warren. He was an Arabic-speaking station officer stationed in Algeria during the height of the War on Terror. With years of field experience and a reputation for navigating high-stakes intelligence work, Warren held a position of immense trust and secrecy. But beneath that polished exterior was a darkness that would ultimately destroy his career and send shockwaves through the intelligence community. In 2008, 2 women came forward with harrowing allegations. Both claimed that while visiting Warren in Algiers, they were drugged and sexually assaulted in his government-provided residence. Their accounts were disturbingly similar. Each described losing consciousness after accepting a drink, only to awaken confused, disoriented, and with physical signs of sexual assault. When the accusations surfaced, the CIA quietly recalled Warren and placed him on administrative leave. But the scandal didn't end there. A federal investigation was launched, uncovering evidence that supported the victim's claims. Authorities found prescription sedatives in Warren's home, and forensic tests aligned with the women's timelines. Warren initially denied wrongdoing, but in 2010, he pleaded guilty to abusive sexual contact and unlawful use of a controlled substance. The court sentenced him to 65 months in federal prison. Edwin P. Wilson. As a former CIA officer who served during the height of the Cold War, Wilson operated in the clandestine corners of international arms dealing, counterterrorism, and covert logistics. By the late 1970s, he had officially left the CIA, but unofficially, he claimed he never stopped serving. In 1983, Wilson was convicted of shipping 20 tons of explosives to Libya and helping train Libyan operatives in assassination techniques, all under the false pretense that he had CIA authorization. The prosecution painted him as a rogue agent turned profiteer, betraying his country for personal gain. The details were damning: forged CIA connections, covert arms deals, and a paper trail that linked him to Muammar Gaddafi's regime. Wilson insisted he was working under deep cover, still serving U.S. interests in an unofficial capacity. But the jury didn't buy it. He was sentenced to 52 years in federal prison. For years, Wilson fought back from behind bars, meticulously gathering evidence. Then, in a shocking turn, it came to light that federal prosecutors had withheld crucial documents, proof that Wilson had been in contact with the CIA during the period in question. In 2003, after spending over 2 decades in prison, a federal judge overturned the conviction, calling the government's conduct a deliberate deception. Wilson walked free in 2004, his name forever caught between the lines of betrayal and loyalty. A spy, a felon, or a scapegoat, Edwin Wilson's true role remains a subject of bitter debate. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos on the channel. I'll greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Joshua Adam Schulte. Many people believe he may have been set up by the agency. Here's how the story unfolds. Schulte was a rising star in the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence, where he worked as a software engineer and systems administrator. From 2010 to 2016, he had high-level access to some of the agency's most sensitive cyber espionage tools, systems designed to infiltrate and manipulate foreign digital infrastructure. But that access, authorities later said, became a weapon of betrayal. In 2017, WikiLeaks released a devastating leak known as Vault 7. Thousands of classified CIA documents detailing the agency's hacking capabilities. The breach was the largest in CIA history. Investigators quickly turned their focus to Schulte, who had left the agency amid internal disputes. Prosecutors alleged that he stole the files and leaked them to WikiLeaks in retaliation for workplace grievances. The leak not only damaged national security, but exposed techniques the CIA used to monitor terrorists and foreign adversaries. During the investigation, agents also discovered over 3,000 images and videos of child sexual abuse on Schulte's encrypted devices, intensifying the gravity of his legal troubles. Schulte was arrested in 2018 and indicted on multiple counts, including illegal transmission of national defense information, obstruction of justice, and possession of child pornography. His first trial in 2020 ended in a mistrial on the espionage charges, but he was retried in 2022 and convicted on 9 felony counts related to the Vault 7 leak. In a separate 2023 trial, he was also found guilty on 4 counts tied to child sexual abuse material. In February 2024, Schulte was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Do you think the CP found on his devices was planted there as a setup? Share your thoughts in the comments. Aldrich Hazen Ames was once a trusted CIA counterintelligence officer, rising through the agency's ranks from 1962 into the early 1990s. Fluent in Russian and posted to sensitive missions in Ankara and later at CIA headquarters, Ames had access to some of the most guarded secrets of U.S. intelligence. But beneath the surface of duty, he harbored a double life fueled by debt, arrogance, and betrayal. Starting in 1985, Ames began selling classified information to the Soviet KGB for a cash payment. What began as a quiet exchange soon escalated into one of the most devastating intelligence breaches in U.S. history. Over 9 years, he compromised the identities of over 100 American assets, leading directly to the execution of at least 10 operatives inside the USSR. The CIA was bleeding secrets, and no one could figure out how. Suspicion finally caught up to him when his sudden wealth, luxury cars, a $540,000 house paid in cash, and expensive shopping sprees could no longer be ignored. A joint FBI-CIA task force quietly placed Ames under surveillance. They tailed him, tapped his phones, and monitored his bank accounts. In 1994, the evidence became undeniable. Ames was arrested alongside his wife, Rosario. Under pressure, he confessed. In federal court, Ames pleaded guilty to espionage and received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He now sits in a high-security federal penitentiary, a symbol of treason from within the very heart of U.S. intelligence. Jerry Chun Lee was once a trusted CIA officer, fluent in Mandarin, trained in counterintelligence, and stationed across Asia during his tenure from 1994 to 2007. But years after leaving the agency, he would become one of the most damaging traitors in U.S. intelligence history. By the time the CIA began noticing something was wrong in 2010, a catastrophe was already unfolding in the shadows. More than a dozen CIA sources in China were disappearing, detained, executed, or simply vanishing without a trace. The agency feared a mole had compromised the entire network. In 2012, FBI agents searched Lee's hotel room in Hawaii and found notebooks filled with sensitive details, real names and phone numbers of CIA informants, operational notes, and classified mission data. Though he wasn't immediately charged, surveillance intensified. investigators uncovered that after leaving the CIA, Lee had quietly begun working with Chinese intelligence officials, receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in exchange for information. The consequences of his betrayal were catastrophic. The CIA's entire spy network in China was effectively wiped out between 2010 and 2012. Lee was finally arrested in 2018 and pleaded guilty in 2019 to conspiracy to communicate, deliver, and transmit national defense information to China. That same year, he was sentenced to 19 years in federal prison. Brian Jeffrey Raymond was a high-ranking U.S. government employee who once worked with the CIA and other intelligence-linked agencies. Stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, Raymond lived a life of privilege and discretion. But behind embassy walls, he was orchestrating a pattern of predation that spanned over a decade and across multiple countries. His crimes came to light in May 2020 when a woman was found naked and disoriented on his apartment balcony. She told authorities she had no memory of what had happened after having drinks with Raymond. That single incident unraveled a horrifying pattern. Investigators recovered over 500 photos and videos on his electronic devices, many showing unconscious nude women being sexually abused. Some victims had no idea what had happened to them until FBI agents contacted them with evidence. The scope of his crimes was staggering. Between 2006 and 2020, Raymond lured women using dating apps, often under the guise of professional diplomacy. He would drug their drinks, assault them while they were unconscious, and document the abuse on camera. At least 24 women were directly identified, though prosecutors believed the number could be higher. In July 2021, Raymond was arrested. He eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse and 1 count of transporting obscene material. In September 2023, he was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. The court also ordered over $260,000 in restitution to his victims, lifetime supervised release, and permanent sex offender registration. Once a man with top-level security clearance, Brian Jeffrey Raymond will now be remembered as one of the most prolific sexual predators ever uncovered inside the U.S. intelligence community. Kevin Patrick Mallory was once a decorated CIA officer and fluent Mandarin speaker who served his country in multiple classified overseas assignments. After leaving the CIA in the early 2000s, Mallory struggled financially, eventually turning to independent consulting. But in 2017, his past and his secrets came back to haunt him. That year, Mallory was arrested and charged under the Espionage Act. Prosecutors alleged he sold U.S. defense secrets to a Chinese intelligence agent for thousands of dollars. The documents he transferred were highly classified, some labeled top secret. One message recovered from his phone read chillingly, "Your object is to gain information and my object is to be paid." The evidence included encrypted WeChat communications, hidden SD cards, and a damning confession during a voluntary FBI interview where he admitted, "I've been spying." The investigation moved swiftly. Mallory's background in intelligence made the betrayal all the more alarming. At trial in 2018, the jury deliberated only a few hours before convicting him on multiple counts of espionage. In 2019, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Jeffrey Sterling, an African-American lawyer recruited into the agency in the early 1990s, he specialized in Iranian operations. But by the early 2000s, his career had unraveled. Sterling claimed it was due to racial discrimination. After filing a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and later suing the CIA, Sterling's relationship with the agency soured dramatically. In 2011, the U.S. government accused Sterling of leaking classified information to journalist James Risen. The alleged leak concerned Operation Merlin, an undercover mission aimed at sabotaging Iran's nuclear ambitions by giving them flawed blueprints. According to prosecutors, Sterling was the anonymous source for Risen's book State of War, which exposed the operation. The government argued that the leak compromised national security and placed covert agents at risk. Despite lacking direct evidence, no emails, no phone records, no eyewitnesses, the jury convicted Sterling in 2015 on 9 felony counts, including espionage. He was sentenced to 42 months in federal prison. Supporters called him a whistleblower, punished for challenging institutional racism. The government insisted he betrayed secrets for revenge. Sterling served his time and was released in 2018, but the questions surrounding his case still linger. Was he a criminal or a casualty of a system that silences dissent? Alexander Yuk Ching Ma, a CI officer fluent in multiple Chinese dialects. He served the agency from 1982 to 1989, specializing in East Asian affairs. After leaving the CIA, Ma disappeared from the intelligence community, only to re-emerge in 2004 as an FBI contract linguist in Honolulu. But what federal agents didn't know then was that Ma had already pledged his loyalty to China. In 2001, Ma met with officers from China's Ministry of State Security at a Hong Kong hotel. Over 3 days, he allegedly handed over classified CIA documents, identifying covert agents, revealing operations, and discussing U.S. intelligence techniques. In exchange, he received $50,000 in cash, a transaction captured on video by U.S. investigators years later. The FBI quietly brought Ma into their ranks in 2004, not to reward him, but to monitor him. For over a decade, suspicions brewed. In 2019, agents staged a sting. An undercover operative posed as a Chinese intelligence officer. Ma, unaware, walked into the trap, reaffirming his past betrayal, offering more information, and accepting another cash payment. In August 2020, Ma was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit espionage. In May 2024, he pleaded guilty in federal court. At sentencing in September 2024, the judge handed down a 10-year prison term, plus 5 years of supervised release. William Kampiles joined the CIA in 1977 as a low-level clerk. Young, ambitious, and assigned to a mundane night shift role in the CIA's watch office, Kampiles wasn't exactly a spy. Instead, he monitored global events and passed reports up the chain. But within a year, his disillusionment with the agency would push him down a path that stunned the intelligence community. In 1978, Kampiles walked out of CIA headquarters with a top-secret manual detailing the KH-11 satellite system, America's most advanced spy satellite at the time. What he did next was brazen. He traveled to Athens and sold the classified document to Soviet intelligence for just $3,000. He wasn't after ideology. He wanted to prove he was CIA material, hoping to impress the Soviets enough to be recruited as a double agent. But Moscow wasn't interested. When he returned to the US, Kampiles bragged about his actions to a friend who quickly tipped off federal authorities. The FBI launched an investigation and arrested Kampiles shortly after. In 1978, he was tried and convicted on 6 counts of espionage. The court sentenced him to 40 years in federal prison. Prosecutors argued that his actions could have compromised national security by revealing critical satellite capabilities to the Soviets at the height of the Cold War. Kampiles served 18 years before being paroled in 1996. Sharon Marie Scranage was a CIA clerk who joined the agency in the late 1970s and was stationed in Ghana during the early 1980s. At first glance, her job appeared mundane, typing reports, handling classified cables, and maintaining routine communications. But what seemed like a simple administrative role would soon unravel into one of the most alarming security breaches in the CIA's African operations. During her assignment, Scranage fell into a romantic relationship with Michael Susudis, a Ghanaian intelligence officer. That relationship wasn't just personal, it turned dangerous. Throughout their affair, Scranage disclosed the identities of CIA assets operating in Ghana. At least 8 Ghanaians working covertly for the United States were exposed, leading to arrests, imprisonment, and irreparable damage to U.S. intelligence efforts in the region. When Scranage returned to the U.S., suspicions were already swirling. A routine polygraph in 1985 revealed inconsistencies. Confronted by investigators, she eventually confessed to the leaks. The Justice Department moved swiftly, charged with multiple counts, including espionage. She ultimately pleaded guilty to violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. In a 1985 trial, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served just 8 months before being released on parole. Kyle Foggo once held one of the most powerful roles in the CIA. He was the executive director, the agency's third-highest ranking official, overseeing the agency's daily operations. Appointed in 2004 during a time of intense global conflict, Foggo had risen through the ranks with a reputation for being bold and unorthodox. But beneath the surface, he was orchestrating a scheme that would ultimately destroy his career and damage the agency's reputation. Foggo was secretly channeling multi-million-dollar contracts to his close friend and defense contractor, Brent Wilkes. One of the most notable was a $3 million deal for bottled water in Iraq. In return, Wilkes lavished him with private jet flights, luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and promises of future employment. Foggo not only failed to disclose these gifts, he lied on official ethics forms and manipulated CIA procurement processes to benefit Wilkes. The web of corruption began to unravel during a broader federal investigation into bribery schemes involving Congressman Duke Cunningham. Foggo's ties to Wilkes drew the attention of prosecutors, leading to a 2007 indictment on 11 counts, including fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Initially, he denied wrongdoing, but as evidence mounted, the pressure became inescapable. In 2008, Foggo struck a deal. He pleaded guilty to a single count of honest services wire fraud, admitting that he had abused his position to enrich his friend. The other charges were dropped. In 2009, a federal judge sentenced him to 37 months in prison. Once one of the CIA's top executives, Foggo left behind a legacy not of service, but of betrayal. Jeffrey W. Castelli was a CIA officer serving as the agency's Rome station chief in the early 2000s. He operated at the heart of U.S. intelligence operations in Italy during the height of the post-9/11 War on Terror. But behind the diplomatic facade and intelligence briefings was a covert operation that would come to haunt U.S.-Italy relations for years. In February 2003, Castelli allegedly oversaw the CIA's involvement in the extraordinary rendition of Hassan Mustafa Osama Nasser, also known as Abu Omar, an Egyptian cleric living in Milan. Nasser was abducted off the street by a CIA-led team and flown to Egypt, where he claimed to have been tortured. The operation was unauthorized under Italian law and carried out without the knowledge or consent of Italian authorities, a blatant breach of national sovereignty. Castelli, along with 22 other CIA operatives, was accused of orchestrating this controversial kidnapping. Italian prosecutors launched an investigation that exposed the rendition network, linking Castelli to the operation through flight logs, hotel records, and phone calls. In 2009, an Italian court convicted Castelli in absentia, sentencing him to 7 years in prison. However, because the U.S. refused to extradite him, and due to his diplomatic immunity, Castelli never served a day behind bars. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting videos here. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you very much.